Um, okay. Good morning, everyone. Buckle up because today we've got a true pest fighting legend with us. Our speaker started his career chasing pests for the USDA, where he spent 12 years battling everything from fire ants and gypsy moths to large scale trapping, fumigation, and biocontrol programs. Basically, if it crawled, flew, or tried to sneak into the country, Frank was on it. He later joined in the founding of McNeely Pest Control, and today he leads the wildlife division at Forshaw. A biologist, licensed pro, outdoor enthusiast, hunter, fisherman, and all around wildlife expert. Please welcome Frank Fowler.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here with you down in sunny Texas. I'm in sunny North Carolina, and it was really cold here this past week. We got down to 12 degrees, which is super cold for us. Which it's been brutal, but it's great to be with you all. Looking forward to a good session with you and trying to share some information about vertebrate wildlife pest management. So let's get started. So we're going to talk. What is a vertebrate? What is that? And actually, I've got a screen froze here. I've got a little technical problem, so bear with me. There we go.
There you go.
That work?
It's all good.
Perfect. All right. So what are vertebrate wildlife pests? What is a vertebrate, right? So are we a vertebrate? Yes, we are. So if you have a spine, if you have a vertebrae in your spine, you're considered a vertebrate, unlike an insect, which is an invertebrate, correct? So we're going to talk about anything with a spine today, right? Anything that has the ability to get in a house, cause a problem. And wildlife is a big part of what we deal with on an everyday basis. Jason was sharing with us earlier. He got a squirrel call this morning, and squirrels in attics, squirrels with this cold weather. This is the time of the year that a lot of these rats and mice and squirrels are seeking shelter, or they're coming in from the outside to try to seek a nice warm place. And what better warm, nice place that you can get into than a attic of a house? You know, they love to get in subfloor insulation or get in insulation. Stuff that would be itchy and terrible for us to get in is just a natural place for those vertebrate pests to get in and overwinter. They're animals with backbones, cause physical and economic damage to people, property, and agriculture. That's probably a little bit better explanation about what we're talking about this morning. Common vertebrate pests include skunks, raccoons, voles, bats, deer mice, prairie dogs, squirrels. Depending on the type of the part of the country that you're in, you're going to have different vertebrate pests than other parts of the country. We were just talking about earlier, I had an opportunity to help a company down your way in Texas to catch a very unusual critter, the porcupine. We don't have those in North Carolina, so that was kind of an interesting thing. And although you probably don't get a lot of calls on those, you might get calls on armadillos or something along those lines. Key characteristics and behavior that make them pests can be varied, but include burrowing, that can be a hazard for livestock and humans, tearing and destroying structures or attempting to nest or live in those areas, and then disease transmission such as rabies and raccoons or skunks. And the burrowing animals that we're talking about could be anything from a groundhog. We call those fossorial animals. That's just a fancy term for an animal that lives underground. And a skunk, a groundhog, a prairie dog. Those are what we call fossorial animals, and they live in low oxygen environments. They if you have to euthanize an animal that lives underground, they're very, especially if you're using CO2 or something along those lines, it's very difficult to do that because they're used to a low oxygen environment. So wildlife pests do have impacts. There are are results of their of their nature, their nature of burrowing or going into overwintering in a structure by their nature. When we impede into their environments or into their ecosystems, sometimes we create, without knowing, a natural place for them to try to nest. And if they're going to be in a house in an attic or a crawl space, you just created a great place for them to overwinter. And we need to understand that, and how what we've done interacts with the wildlife, and then how to counteract that. Agricultural damage is a major problem. Millions and millions, I would say billions of dollars a year occur from wildlife pests and crop destruction, livestock predation. Your coyotes, for instance, are a major impact on sheep out in the Midwest, and USDA have major programs where they do coyote control to lessen the depredation on livestock out there. And then even birds, certain birds like the black vulture is a predator of baby cows. So sometimes we don't even think about what these animals can do. And of course, animals, birds in orchards and crops you can have a bunch of birds come into a blueberry patch and completely, in a couple of days, wipe out the crop that farmer has spent all year producing. And Frank is a great example of that. Here I'm supposed to be this great wildlife guy, and I didn't get a single tomato out of my garden this year. The squirrels came in and figured out it was a dry summer for us, and they figured out that there was good moisture in a tomato. So they took over Frank's tomatoes, and we would have neighbors saying, "Hey, does anybody have tomatoes around here?" There's squirrels sitting in the trees in my yard eating these big, juicy tomatoes. And it was just awful that here I am supposed to be this guy that knows about wildlife and couldn't control the squirrels in my own backyard. But that's a great example of sometimes we're limited in what we can do. I just can't go into my backyard and trap or shoot or do a big cage from an aesthetic standpoint. My neighbors would have a fit if I built this big cage that was effective about keeping the squirrels out. But also, I can't shoot them in the city limits, and trapping them. You're not supposed to trap an animal like that without permits in many situations. So that's a great example of being limited by laws and regulations and or perception. And of course, when we do any kind of work, we need to act like we're on video, just like we are today, right? We're on video. What are we going to do that's going to minimize the impact that we would receive from a negative review from a customer or the public, but also maximize what we can do to control that pest? And that's always a huge balance. To be able to balance that, to be able to make sure that we're following those. We have to keep it in the road, right? Health risk, disease transmission is always a concern, whether we're doing the wildlife work ourselves or we're out doing pest control in the summertime, and you got somebody a technician or an employee that might pick up a tick. You got Lyme disease. We've got rabies, in a lot of the vertebrates. The hantavirus, right? The plague. In the news here in the last year, Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arkawa, died from hantavirus, right? And that's a virus carried in the deer mice, and that really hits close to home when you have a famous actor that we've all known for years on the big screen, and they end up passing away from something that's pretty rare. But we don't need to mitigate or to minimize the importance of taking care of PPE, wearing the respirators when you're in a situation where you're cleaning up mouse droppings, or in a crawl space or an attic, wear that PPE or the protective equipment that might keep us from contacting that, gloves or again a qualified respirator that would filter out some of these pathogens as well. Environmental impacts are also something that we need to consider. Disruption of ecosystems. And a recent example in the news is the barred owl, right? That's the owl that we have on the East Coast, and you have in Texas. That when he hoots at night, you hear he says, "Who hoots for you? Who hoots for you all?" He's got a very distinctive, very distinctive sound or call that they make that identifies them when you can't even see the animal. But that owl has expanded its home range all the way across the U.S. and has gone into California. Well, there's an owl called the spotted owl, which has been very it's been in the news in recent years for a different reason, because the spotted owl is an endangered species. And so when you've got the barred owl that's more gregarious and is a little more aggressive at catching their food and maybe a little more adapted to catching the availability of food, it's catching the food of the spotted owl. And they're scared that spotted owl is going to eventually become extinct. And it was on its way to extinction anyway. This is just one more thing that's kind of pushing it over the edge. Now, that creates a very tough situation, because you've got people on one side saying the barred owl is just as important as the spotted owl. There's more of them, but they're talking about going in, and it may have already happened, and removing a large percentage of those barred owls out of the ecosystem. And the news article I read, they were going to kill barred owls to reduce their population so the spotted owl can live. That's a very tough call, and it creates a situation that you wouldn't predict would ever even happen, but it has happened. We've got legal and ethical considerations, right? That's a very important thing. Just like I was talking about earlier, shooting a pigeon with an air rifle is one thing, but trying to take out an animal in a city limit or using a non-approved euthanasia method, and euthanasia needs to be done in combination with veterinary standards to be a good practice. And euthanasia is a subject that we don't like to bring up, but when we do wildlife, we have to consider that. In North Carolina, if an animal carries, and we'll talk about this later in a raccoon example, but if an animal is capable of carrying rabies, they cannot legally be relocated in our state. And each state has a different rule and regulation on that. The reason for that is introduction of a rabid animal into a non-rabies population. So again, laws and regulations on wildlife management recently in the news: spotted owl, barred owl, bobcats, and rodenticides in South Carolina. And if you all haven't heard about that or read about that, and I'm sure you probably have, look it up. That's a real big factor in the big rodenticide push that we're seeing now. And if you've not done exclusion in the past for rodents or wildlife, it might be something to start brushing up on and getting better at. As rodenticides become more and more under the microscope, we're going to have to be more and more willing and able to keep these animals out of structures. And if you get good at exclusion, there's a lot of good money in doing that. And there's a lot of good materials out there in our industry that are being manufactured for exclusion. When I first started doing exclusion back in the day, we made a lot of the stuff and we still make a large percentage of it, but there are companies that are producing really good exclusion products now, and we need to be able to take advantage of that. Ethical concerns, humane trapping, of course, is what we call best management practices. And you see the stories about in the Midwest, you see the billboards of the coyote or the wolf caught in a trap, or an animal has chewed its foot off to get out of a trap. And people that are against trapping have have created this sense of urgency among their group that says trapping is the worst thing in the world that can be done to an animal. And it's actually, if trapping is done properly, trapping is one of the most humane things that you can do when we're moving an animal. Best management practices are something that the national trappers associations and local trappers associations worldwide have adopted and created traps with offset jaws with rubber pads on them that will actually catch an animal, or if they catch a non-target, say you catch a dog or a cat in a foothold trap, you can remove that animal and release them without harm to the paw. And the days of using spikes and using non-humane traps are not allowed in professional trapping. And somebody that's using that is not following best management practices and should not be doing that. Again, euthanasia methods, we're not going to dwell a lot on that today and talk about it, but euthanasia methods are important following the veterinary standards, and then the conservation issues such as endangered and threatened species in pest management. What do you do when you've got you've got something like a raven coming into a shed, or they're coming into a industrial facility and removing windshield wipers off of people's cars, which we've had happen. They just, for some reason, start thinking their job in life is to remove every windshield wiper from the community's parking lot, and you got a protected animal here that's doing that. What are you going to do? How are you going to do that? Vultures are a great example of that. These are federally protected birds, but there's ways to manage these and follow these standards and doing it within the parameters of what you should or should not be doing. And then permits and control regulations, working with the state and federal agencies to control vertebrate pests while protecting species of special concern. Out in the Midwest, you've got the black-footed ferret and the burrowing owl, and these animals are in the same areas where you're going in and controlling prairie dogs, right? And you're dropping a fumigant down in a hole that could contain one of these animals. You got to be conscious of that. You got to work around those situations where you need to protect them. And if you're not prepared to do that, you shouldn't be doing the work, because we can't go in and just be willy-nilly and put something out and not be worried about what else are we impacting. And we don't want to impact a non-target animal. That's a major concern. What are some methods of vertebrate pest control? And we're going to get out of this verbiage here in a minute and get into some case studies, but I think it's very important that we cover some of these topics before we start into the fun stuff here. So bear with me. Exclusion. Again, that's a big part of what is the future of pest control and wildlife is exclusion, whether it's rodents or keeping animals from getting into structures. Fencing, netting, sealing entry points. Do we go in with a foam, or do we go in with a backing with metal in it and a foam combination to keep something out? A rodent will chew right through foam, but if you use a backing in there with that foam or the caulking, then you're going to do a better job of long-term control. Habitat modification, removing food sources, water access, and shelter. We all know that those rodents, a rat has to drink every day, right? Finding that water source, cutting off that water access, doing a great job of sealing a structure up so that animal can't get shelter inside of that. Jason said he got a call yesterday or this morning about a squirrel getting a chimney. What are we going to do about that? Well, you can go get the animal out and then install a chimney cap. That way that doesn't happen. Have them call a chimney sweep, have a chimney sweep clean that chimney really good, and then put a cap over the top of it. That chimney can still be used, but then that animal can't gain access. My mantra is, if they're not paying rent, they don't need to be there, right? We need to get those animals out of our house and and get our house back. It is our house, not their house. But multiple generations grow up in a house, then you're going to have real trouble keeping that animal out of that structure because they feel like that's their home, right? And and if you lock the keys in the house one night, you're going to try every door and every window to get back in. So if you're doing exclusion and you miss a spot, they're going to just run around and find another spot and get back in. So it's a holistic approach. Um, you you want to conduct a good inspection, and this is one of my takeaways. So, this is so important. The number one thing is pest identification. Find out your enemy. You got to know what kind of animal you're dealing with. We do that by when someone calls in. Are you hearing the noise in the daytime or the nighttime? Well, why do we need to know that? Why do we need to ask that question? Well, if we're hearing noises of scratching at nighttime, it's probably a flying squirrel or a mouse. If we're hearing it during the daytime, it's probably that gray squirrel like Jason had that was going down that chimney or in that attic space because they're more active during the daytime. Or it could be a rat, right? Or at nighttime, it could be a raccoon getting in the house. So very, very important part of what we do. And then the other takeaway would be conduct a thorough inspection before you begin the job. And we'll talk about that again later. Conduct a thorough inspection before you begin the job, because if you don't, you probably will before the job is complete. And you know what I mean by that. If you do it at the end and you're figuring it out at the end, you probably already priced that job. And now you're going to have to go back to redo it to be able to really get what you should have discovered at the beginning of the inspection. So kind of a key takeaway there. Repellents, that's something that we can use, chemical, biological, sensory repellents. What do we talk about sensory repellents? Either smell, which is a grape extract, irritates the trigeminal nerve of a bird, and it acts like mace and will repel them. We got chemical controls and biological controls. So, and repellents in many states fall under the pest control acts, and you have to be licensed to do that in many states. So make sure you follow your local laws and regulations. Hunting and culling, legal aspects, effectiveness of local considerations. A pigeon, a English sparrow, are non-native species, and in most states there are no restrictions on controlling those. But you get songbirds or any of these federally protected migratory birds, they fall under the Federal Migratory Treaty Act under U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and you don't want to get a visit from Mr. Green Jeans, right? Your local game warden or your federal agent come in and say, "What are you doing here? Y'all just used Avitrol in the wrong way and have knocked a bunch of birds down, and you got to answer a bunch of questions." So make sure that you are and Avitrol would be an example of a chemical control. That's a corn that's treated with a product called a stupefactant that in higher concentration will actually kill birds, and lower concentrations will cause birds to react to it, and the other birds see that, and it moves them away. So what is integrated pest management? We hear that term a lot, right? We hear about IPM and conducting IPM. Well, we can do the same thing with wildlife, combining multiple techniques for effective pest control, especially important with birds. The reason I say that, if you're going to try to do one thing for a bird, if you're going to just put up a bird spike, or you're just going to put up a netting, or you're going to just do one thing, you're probably in most situations not going to be successful. If you just spray a grape extract out and expect that to take care of that bird problem, it's not going to work by itself typically. You have to do multiple things. You may want to go in and do your bird spikes in combination with the grape extract, in combination with some netting. 2 or 3 things dealing with birds. Go in with the trapping regimen. Take the numbers down. Remove the number of offending animals on that job site. Especially in bird management, it's important with birds, especially, to do multiple techniques for an effective control program. monitoring pest populations. Well, how did we do that before? Well, before we did site visits, right? We'd go out there and watch bats come out at night, or we would go count how many vultures using binoculars that were coming on the roof. Now we have trail cameras. And if you're not using trail cameras, you're missing out. And we're gonna give some examples of trail cameras here coming up. Decision-making processes, when and how to intervene, identify, manage, and prevent the pests and their damage. We got some various case studies we're going to talk about today. One of them is lessons learned. The reason we say lessons learned, we learn things the hard way. We're going to talk about some of the good and some of the bad, and then we're going to talk about some of the success stories and the challenges encountered. So now we're going to get into the fun part, right? So wildlife equals remediation and adventure, right? So you're going to see some pictures of Frank when he had hair. This is what termites will do to your hair over the many years, if you didn't know that. So, but yeah, this was back in my younger days when. So it's adrenalizing. It's an adventure, right? Just like Wild King of the Crocodile Hunter on television. It's all fun and games, and of course those skunks those smell like money. Those great things. And then this is an example of using that trail camera that I was talking about. That's an old Reconyx trail camera that I had back in the day. We thought we were the latest and greatest. That was a real expensive camera, but we had to go out and get the card out of it every day. Now we've got the technology that it comes to your phone or comes to your iWatch. You can see that animal in real time, right? Working with wildlife can be fun, adrenalizing, satisfying, and profitable. Working with wildlife can be frustrating, dangerous, hot, dirty, nasty, time-consuming, and very unprofitable. Now you see this date on the bottom of that picture there, 12/2. That was right before Christmas that year. One of my employees called me and said, "Mr. Frank," he called me with a kind of a high-pitched voice. He'd straddle that floor joist right there, if you can imagine. He did not fall through. That was a 30-foot drop. He was walking up there and had a pair of overshoes, those dust cover bunnies on his feet, and it slipped off and punched through. Christmas came early that year in the house, and it was terrible to actually explain that to the customer, but thank goodness that employee did not fall. That's kind of the parts of the job that we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of safety. We need to go home to our families every night. And the use of the PPE and the use of techniques properly. Ladder safety is a big part of wildlife that we're not going to get into today, but that's a very important consideration of this. And then making sure that your employees know what your expectations are of them. Do you actually send an employee up to do this kind of thing? Do you mandate them taking floorboards or something in the attic to avoid this kind of thing? So your clients, helping solve human and wildlife conflicts can be rewarding both financially and they're inwardly knowing that we are helping the public. Plus, clients can offer referrals for new business and references for years to come, right? That's what we want. We want we were just talking earlier before we started this, Jason and Jamie, we were talking about doing things a little bit different. And this clients can offer referrals for new business that's the gift that keeps on giving. But if you do things the bad way, you get bad news travels a lot faster, right? So you're going to have to deal with the backside of that. So make sure that you're doing things the right way. And no matter how the client, you're always going to try to exceed expectations, be honest, and price your work fairly. And sticking by these principles will pay off in the long run. And then no matter what, there's some folks you're just going to have to not going to be able to satisfy. And then how many of us have done jobs, and everybody in the room here would raise your hand if I would have you raise your hand. You think back on the situations you were like, man, I wish I'd have never, ever gotten involved with this customer because things went sideways, right? So experiences create both good lessons good and bad stories or lessons, and then also creates building blocks of knowledge. Do you have 10, and think about this, do you have 10 years of experience or 1 year of experience 10 times, right? So this is a case study here, kind of a little fun case study. Something's digging up my azalea bush. This was a house that we had, a client called and said, hey, we got something digging up against the foundation. To give you a reference, this is a little knee wall here, and that little white in the right side is the base of the house that we're seeing. But this hole kept getting dug out. And we interviewed the client, and first things, we asked, do you have any animals or pets? No, we don't have, no cats and dogs. No. So, but we keep filling this hole in and it keeps getting dug out. So start thinking about, what are we going to do to figure this out? Are we going to look for sign? Are we going to look for droppings? Are we going to look for hair? We started doing all that. We couldn't find anything. We look up, and then for reference point, that digging is to the right of this picture here. So what are we looking at here? We're seeing a large ivy bed next to shrubbery. We got a trail that's going up through there. That's actually a walkway or stepping stones that are going up through the middle of that ivy bed. You see the bird feeder up there, right? Could that be a contributing factor? We got a hummingbird feeder up there as well. This is a beautiful home. We're just trying to figure out where we're going with this, right? Look at the base of that feeder. So something's been down there for sure. But what is that? Or what are the signs that we're seeing here actually going to be the same type of signs that we may be looking for that may be causing that problems? Could be. If you look back through those trees, that could be water, right? So it actually is water. So now I'm thinking maybe, wow, we got some fresh dirt there. I'm not seeing any tracks down there and any of this stuff. So is it something coming up out of the pond? Is it a beaver? Is it an otter? Is it, what are we dealing with? And we've already talked to the homeowner about, do they have dogs? Do they have pets? No, we don't have any of that. Is it a bear? And these are all the things that we need to run through our mind, but we also don't need to be focusing on one thing. We need to start eliminating here. So this was the digging area right up next to the house, right down next to the brick under that azalea bush is the hole that's been filled and dug out repeatedly. And at this point, we're still guessing. We don't know what it is. But if you notice at the bottom of that picture, it says Reconics, right? This is the hole that's completely been dug out, and it's dug out freshly. So we break the old trail camera out. Now back in the day, this was about a $900 trail camera. Now a trail camera is $125. This trail camera had a card, a SIM card that you had to go get out and take back to the office each time. But that's the technology we had back then. Now we've got an instant cell phone picture that comes to your phone, and you wouldn't have to do all this. So we set the camera up. We go up. You see us in the background talking to the homeowner. We're going to monitor this for a few days and try to come up with a solution for you. So we watch it, and then all of a sudden we look, and there he is. And it's the neighbor's dog. It's not what we thought. So he's over there digging, and he's digging a hole, and what he's doing is going in and cooling his belly off every day, right? So it wasn't this wily critter. This was the neighbor's dog that was coming down there and cooling his belly off every day and leaving. So now he looks up. Oh, I see the trail camera. I got to get out of here. Boom, he's gone. So this was a situation where the homeowner was glad to know, and they were able to go up to the end of the road and talk to the neighbor and say, hey, need to keep your dog put up. We got a situation here, and the problem was solved. So what kind of lessons can we learn by this? The use of trail cameras can be very effective in determining animal movement species. Always attempt to identify the animal causing concern before you go out and just start setting trapping devices. identify the animal. Let's keep going back to that. Always identify the animal, whether it's a cockroach that you're dealing with in a residential or commercial situation. There's a big difference between an American cockroach and a smoky brown cockroach and a German cockroach, isn't there? Same thing with an animal. Their behaviors are going to be very different. Their arrival times are going to be very different, depending on whether they're nocturnal or not. Always look closely at all potential signs that can lead you into identification of the target problem or animal: tracks, droppings, hair, scuff marks, chewing, new growth or discoloration of damaged wood or shrubs. But sometimes we have to put that puzzle together. We have to use each one of those signs that we find to try to determine that problem. Here's a call that we got: the animal's ripping up my roof. Now you notice on this roof, you got a nice shingled roof on the top, but down low, we got the log cabin, and the back porch has been shingled with cedar shakes. And something was just tearing the cedar shake roof up. And so if you see the big splinters that are pulled up on the side there, you got scratch marks. We're looking for sign. We're not seeing a whole lot. And we're saying, what in the world is this? And when I give this talk to a live audience, I'll say, what is it? So be thinking in your mind, what are we dealing with? Is this a squirrel? Is this a raccoon? Is this a woodpecker, right? What is this, a possum? What kind of animal could be causing and tearing up a roof? Could it be a vulture? It could be. It could be all of these things, right? But how are we going to determine that? And can we do trail cameras? Yes, we can. But let's try to eliminate what we can before we go to that point. We're digging out between there. We're seeing seeds. We're seeing all this potential food, right? And you need to be asking yourself, what is this? What is this? What could be eating these seeds? What could be doing this damage? Well, you see all the caulk being removed. That almost looks like a bird or a woodpecker trying to pull it out. So we're looking further. We're looking in all these scratch marks. It's just kind of leading towards a rodent, isn't it? It's kind of leaning towards something. And actually, you're seeing the rodent chewing on the edge there, right? So now I'm leaning towards rats or mice or squirrels, especially with the seeds. So we're kind of narrowing it down. I'm thinking more of a rodent of some type now versus a bird or a woodpecker. You see the scratch marks. You see that hair down in the bottom left-hand corner. So, and that kind of gives you a perspective on the size. And we're thinking, hey, we're going to probably have to get the trail camera out here to start looking. And then we find it. We find the dropping. It's a gray squirrel. So we see that dropping there that appeared the following day. And we were able to go in there and do a trapping regimen and remove the offending animals, and go in with some hot pepper capsaicin based product in those edges that we're chewing on, and help that homeowner. So what kind of lessons can we learn? Obtain as much information about what you're doing to investigate prior to going. You may need additional equipment. Interview the homeowner. Are they hearing or seeing anything? In this case, that homeowner didn't see a thing or hear anything. So that you're at a disadvantage at that point. Don't ever not listen to what that homeowner says, because they can be clues. They're not a wildlife expert, but they can give you clues to help you a whole lot. Confirm through inspection. Interview the client, which is valuable information many times, and there will be various clues you find that kind of lead you down to where that you're determining what the problem is. So here's one that we had that was a home run. We had raccoons in the ceiling. Well, how did I know that? Well, they called and said, we got raccoons. I said, well, how do you know that? They said, well, we stood up on the desk and stuck our head up in the ceiling and saw one. I said, okay. So we got out there. This is going to be a great day. You know, we're excited about it because this is going to be an easy peasy job. We walk around back. You see the rub marks down at the bottom like you would have with a rat or a mouse. Well, this is raccoon rub marks. So the raccoon's coming up, walking up down the edge of that block, going up and down that downspout, coming up on the house. It was raining that day. So we go in and we set up, we start looking, we said, what's wrong with this roof? Good gracious. And then we look, the whole roof line's opened up in the back. Yep, that's where they're getting in. Pretty straightforward. We see raccoon footprints on the rubber there. This is going to be a great, easy peasy raccoon job. Little did we know what was about to happen here. So we set up our raccoon traps. We come back the next day. All of our raccoon traps have been thrown, including conibears and cage traps. And you notice we got plywood sitting under those traps because a raccoon will get in the trap, and if there's big enough weave on that trap, they can tear up a commercial roof. So you want to be real careful with that. But why were our traps thrown? The bait was still in the traps. All the traps were thrown. We couldn't figure this out. I looked off the roof and I looked down at the dumpster and I see something at the base of the dumpster, and there's a water bowl and there's a cooler full of cat food right there. Ah, is that a clue? Well, absolutely. Go down there and look, and there's raccoon paw prints all over everything. Well, little did we know that if you look past that blue SUV, there's a ladder on the side of the building. That is not my ladder. The lady with the laptop shack there that owned that, little did we know, she was the head of PETA for the local chapter. And she took it upon herself when she found out that the management company had hired us to trap and seal up that structure for raccoons, and she'd been feeding them back there. So we had to get the police involved. We are a licensed animal damage control agent, which had written a permit, and it is a misdemeanor to interfere with the performance of an animal control agent in the performance of their duties. So they gave the lady an ultimatum not to go back on the roof. If she had any more involvement, the police would come and arrest her. And then the management company told them if it ever happened again, they would cancel their lease. So they had thousands of dollars worth of damage, and they didn't have a choice. They had to control these raccoons. So sometimes things happen like this. Now, do you think they can give you bad reviews? Absolutely. And matter of fact, this lady cranked up on our social media platform. We had to shut our website down for a few weeks. We were getting threats from California. She took it nationally. These people really, they love animals more than they love their own children sometimes. So you don't know what you're signing up for in many of these situations. So we trapped the animals, got everything sealed up. We got a call the next week, they're back. Well, we had missed, if you see that scoop, that air scoop at the very end down there, we'd missed an air scoop. So we set traps up on that. You can see the scratch marks around the edges of it. We trapped those animals, got another call. We're still hearing noises. They're back again. We didn't look any further. We didn't realize there were squirrels going in the building. So we set up squirrel traps. I mean, it keeps getting better. Now we're into week 2 or 3. We're still trapping animals over there. Fortunately, the management company said, listen, do what it takes. You know, if you need to charge us extra, charge us extra. So we were able to recoup our money. But in a lot of situations, the customer's going to say, hey, you told us you were going to do it for this number, this amount of money. So make sure you're very verbal in what you tell people you're going to do. Also put it in writing on your contracts. And then we ended up catching squirrels. Then we found rats that we had missed because we knew it was raccoons, right? We had not done a thorough inspection. Now we're doing we're finding these additional revenue opportunities. But can you recoup your money? Luckily, in this case, we could. Most situations, the client's not going to pay extra. So start out making a complete inspection. If you don't initially, you will before the job is completed. I repeat that again. Very important concept. Always evaluate your findings closely. Adjust your trapping technique selection in order to be successful. And always be mindful of other pest problems called for with a specific problem. And don't overlook the opportunity to upsell an account. you can ask for it, right? A lot of times they're going to say, "No, you told us on this contract up front." But if you explain your situation, most of the time a customer's going to understand you're legitimately trying to help them, and then educate your clients, just like we're doing today. Get a little education, get a little knowledge. The client will really appreciate your professionalism. And if trapping devices are tampered with, you will have to adjust your strategies to solve the concern, right? Well, this is a midsummer raccoon job, July 2nd. Well, what's unusual about that? In North Carolina, an attic is super hot on July the 2nd. I mean, super hot. Normally, also, that is not a breeding time of the year. Typically, that's done in the spring of the year when those attic spaces are cooler. Very unusual to have a situation like that, but we didn't know at that time it was a raccoon job. Um, we suspected it was. Um, we got in there and the lady was hearing noises downstairs in the kitchen. Looking out, you can see this is looking out of the kitchen out. There's the car sitting outside there, and the noises were in the bottom left of that area up there, but they're also hearing noises in the attic. So we go in the attic, and sure enough, there's raccoon pee and droppings. Raccoons are very good at leaving sign, but they also pee and poop in the same place. It's a we call it a raccoon latrine or a commode. And of course, raccoon droppings, if you're not familiar with raccoons, if you trap raccoons, you are probably, but if you're not, look up raccoon roundworm when we get off today and read about that. If that won't scare you to death, nothing will. You need to be real careful dealing with raccoon droppings. It's something that we would not want to catch, that raccoon roundworm, as humans. And then those droppings, you can't use a sanitizing agent or disinfectant to control those droppings or to kill that pathogen. Those droppings would actually have to be removed and not heated, actually be incinerated to become inert. So we sent a one of our guys up there to set a trap. And I'm going to skip through these slides quickly for people that are bothered by seeing a dead animal. But we set this trap. We caught an animal going into the structure. Why it is important that he was going in, we'll talk about. It's also very important to determine the sex of that animal. That animal was going in, was not coming out of that vent, and it was a male. Well, what that tells us is a male raccoon going into a structure like that could be going in to sleep, but it's hot. An animal's not going to go into a hot attic without a reason. And raccoons are just like bears. A male raccoon will kill babies to make the mother raccoon come back into season so he can breed and pass his genes on. That's just a common trait with raccoons. Well, what that told me was if that male raccoon was going in there, there was probably a female. There may be baby raccoons where they're hearing that noise. But we see where they've torn up the inside. We ended up going in with trapping devices on the inside. We trapped the female that was in there as we expected. We used the trail camera to determine our activity, to determine anything else was going in and out. And then we sent Ed down to cut a hole. And sure enough, there was the babies in the bottom of that wall. Now, why would those babies be down in the first floor of that house and they're coming in on the roof? That mama's being a good mom and she's hiding those babies, right? So that male won't kill them. So we used our biology, we used the information to determine that. You can see where she's been scratching and pulled all the insulation out of the inside of that wall, and then scratched those 2x4s up going in and out every day. And she hid those babies down there and got them away from that male. That male is probably coming in there every day. At the end of the job, we put a roof vent guard over the top, and you say, "Oh, that's a terrible sealant job." What we did, we took foam. We foamed the exterior of that roof vent guard temporarily That way, if there was something else in there that needed to get out, we didn't trap it in there. If they came in and bumped into that thing from the inside, it would keep an animal from coming in from the outside. But if they wanted to get out, they could just push through that foam and get out. We left that up for about a week or so, and then we permanently sealed it. So we learned that raccoons can be present later in the summer past normal rearing times. Multiple raccoons may cohabitate in a home in different parts of the structure. Raccoons are extremely agile and capable of climbing and jumping. And then raccoons damage and contaminate insulation, which may cause potential fire hazards and or it could burn the house down if those wires got interrupted. And then again, interviewing that client, and don't disregard that, because if you miss those babies, you trap those adults out of there, then you've got animals that die in walls, can create an odor, can cause more of a problem. So we've got some innovative solutions in vertebrate pest management that are out there today. And some of these we need to be aware of and take advantage of. Drones. Of course, drones come with licenses. I've got a son that's a pilot, and he's got a drone license. He got his drone license when he was in high school. You have to be licensed by the FAA to fly drones for commercial operations now. So even if you send one up just to look at a house legally, you're supposed to be a licensed drone pilot by the FAA to run those things. You got remote monitoring capabilities now. We got a lot of products out there that can sensors that can be triggered. And again, trail cameras, they give you just instant results. Genetic approaches with birth control, CO2 and carbon monoxide and dioxide. Lots of good repellents. I really like this product. It's Pigeon X for birds. It's a capsaicin pepper based product. It's a repellent for birds. And then the rodent version of that product is called Detour. It's the same active ingredient, capsaicin pepper. If you work with this stuff, wear gloves. And it's something you don't want to get on your. You want to wash your hands really good. You don't want to get it in your mouth if you're chewing tobacco. You don't want to use the restroom after using this product, or you can come up with a problem. So, but they work really, really well. And then confirming with trail cameras. If you're not using them, again, think about it, because especially with rodents and attics, we had a client in Georgia that had a roof rat problem in a school that popped up that made national news. We got them some trail cameras, and in 2 days they had found the entry point of the rats and solved the problem and got the school out of the news. And do you think you've got a client for life with that? Absolutely. They also comply with the 24-hour trap check rules that are required in many states. So you don't have to go out and check those wildlife traps every day. That camera reports in every day, and also will trigger a picture, send it to a phone or a tablet when that animal's captured. You've got ovo control for birds, birth control for pigeons that's kind of new, and there's some rodent ovo controls that are out there too. It's not good. There's just tools in the toolbox. It doesn't work in every situation. Different gases for rodents that are out there now, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. There's the Burrow RX machines. There's different types. This is a smoke machine that's used to try to see. And then the use of drones. But again, consider your license considerations before you using these drones, right? This can be a very useful tool, but what happens if you're using this and the next door neighbor is washing dishes at the kitchen window and sees that drone looking at her and calls in and reports it, and now you're trespassing on the neighbor's property because you're looking at the lady washing the dishes through the window. Stuff we just don't think about, right? And now you got to answer why you don't have a license while you're using these things. And we used them at our company when they first came out, but there were no regulations on them. Now there's real regulations, people interfering with them around airports, and you need to be really, really cautious with using them. But drones, there's people using them for ag spraying. There's people using them for putting out wildlife repellents, tracking animals. They've got heat-seeking sensors on them now, where you can track a wounded animal or an animal. And then there's Avitrol, right? Chemical solutions for managing birds on commercial roofs. This is a restricted use product, but if it's used properly in the right hands, I used it for many, many years, and it was a really great part of my wildlife management program for commercial establishments. So we got just wrapping up just about 4 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes early. I don't know, Jamie or Jason, if we want to, if you take any questions offline, feel free to reach out to me and I'll try to answer anything like that. But I've enjoyed being with you all, and it's been a real pleasure, and I hope to be with you again sometime.
So yeah, thank you. That was a great presentation. Right quick, Travis has a question. Does the extract drive them out? Where do you buy it?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Does the grape extract drive them out?
Okay,
where do you buy it?
Yeah, so grape extract, that is very specific to birds. It doesn't work on other animals, and the reason it works, there's two types of grape flavoring, and this is actually a food grade product. There's methylenthranolate and dimethylantranolate. Those are the two types of grape flavoring that are in Welch's grape juice and in grape bubble gum and in Kool-Aid. And so they smell really grapey. To a bird, they have a trigeminal nerve. It runs up their neck. We have one too. Trigeminal means three. And us, it runs up our neck, runs down under our teeth. That's the one that the dentist hits when you're in a chair, and it makes you jump out of the chair. The other branch goes behind in your sinuses, and the other one goes into our nose. In a bird, it goes to their nostrils, into the back of their beak, into the back of their throat. When that odor becomes aerosolized, it acts like mace and repels those birds. There's products called flock free that can be used for that. There are lots of great flavoring that are used in goose control products that can be sprayed on turf to move birds, and there's also some aerosolized versions that can be sprayed or fogged into an area. If you ever walk into the garden sections of some of your big box stores and you smell a grape odor, those are generators that are actually blowing a fog or blowing small particulate matter of that product out. Again, it's food grade, so it's not going to hurt humans, but it's really a repellent to a bird. So it doesn't work on other animals, but it does a great job at repelling birds. Again, using it in combination with other exclusion techniques.
Yep, and I've heard great success on grackles in the trees around parking lots where they make a huge mess.
Yes,
but
sir.
You've got to be super aggressive with it.
You do. You absolutely do,
So,
Jason. That's a great point. And then use other just if you've got those birds that are roosting like that. We used to make what we call clapper boards. We would take two boards and put door hinges on the outside and then put a hinge at the bottom, and we would take those handles and with that hinge and clap those boards together. It makes a loud noise, and then you take the tank mix from Flock Free or one of the other great products and put it in a backpack mister like you would use for applying mosquito control products. Put it in the tank, and you can go in at night and blow it into those trees like you were talking about for grackles and for blackbirds, and you can move those birds out of those trees with that. But you got to be super aggressive. You got to do it multiple nights, and be careful what you promise. Don't overpromise control, because it works great sometimes, and then sometimes you can't be aggressive enough, right? So you just make sure you're dealing with time and materials. But a lot of times over 3 or 4 nights in those situations, you can actually move a whole flock.
yeah, no, it's really interesting. And thank you for the story about the client. A lot of times your client's not the problem; it's your client's client, and they can really wreak havoc.
They sure can.
Okay, Jane Parsons said, "It seems education inspection is the key to professional service. Thank you for reinforcing the point."
That's the key to it. That's the key to it, and making sure that we're taking that knowledge that we have and sharing it with the client. Make sure they understand why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then when you act professional and you do that, they're going to have you back for more. And I'll tell you another little tidbit. and we ran a pest and wildlife company for many years. If you can get that raccoon out of Mrs. Jones' attic, or get those raccoons out of that commercial establishment like we did, you can do their pest control, and you need to ask for it. If you don't ask for it, you're backing up, because if you can do that, they're going to want you to do their pest control. They're going to want you to do their termite, and then you get a reoccurring revenue service out of that. So make sure you cross sell. Wildlife will get you in a lot of doors that you won't be able to get into, especially commercial accounts. And when they figure out that you're good enough to do that, many times they'll ask you if you can do the pest control. So don't discount that. That's
a great point. Jamie Claire, thank you so much for facilitating this again. It runs like a sewing machine. And Frank, thank you for presenting. I really enjoyed this talk.
Well, I'm glad. That tickles me, and thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jamie Claire, for having me. Love to come back if you'll have me sometime. And
absolutely.
I hope everybody has a great Christmas.